My daughter told me I was embarrassing her in front of her new friends, so I smiled, handed her my house key, and drove home. 3 days later, she had 42 missed calls on my phone. I did not answer a single one. I want to tell you something about my hands before I tell you anything else. They are not pretty hands. The knuckles are thick from 30 years of framing houses in Michigan winters. There is a scar on my right thumb from a table saw incident in 1987 that I never got properly stitched because we could not afford the ER copay that week. My daughter used to hold those hands when she was small. She used to trace the calluses with her tiny finger and ask me how I got each one. I told her every story. She listened like they were fairy tales. She does not look at my hands anymore. I drove 4 hours from Grand Rapids to Ann Arbor on the Saturday before Thanksgiving. I did not tell her I was coming because I wanted to surprise her. I had a pecan pie in a box on the passenger seat, still warm, from the bakery on Fulton Street that she loved when she was growing up. I also had an envelope in my jacket pocket. Inside that envelope was a cashier's check. I will tell you how much it was for later. The amount matters. My daughter Jennifer had just moved into a new house. She and her husband Scott had been in their rental for 3 years, always complaining about the landlord, always saying they needed more space, always just a few months away from buying something of their own. Then one evening in September, Jennifer called me and said they had found the perfect place in Ann Arbor. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, close to the school where her daughter Lily went. She was breathless with excitement. She sounded like she was 20 years old again. The problem was the down payment. I did not hesitate. I told her I would help. That is what fathers do. My wife Carol passed 8 years ago from pancreatic cancer, and when she went, she made me promise to take care of our girls. Jennifer is the older one. Her sister lives out in Portland, and we talk every Sunday. Jennifer and I used to be close. Or I thought we were. I wired them $65,000 in September. It was a gift, not a loan. I made that clear. I said, keep it, use it, do not worry about paying it back. I said your mother would have wanted you to have a home. Jennifer cried on the phone. She said I was the best father in the world. She said she did not know what she would do without me. That was 8 weeks before she told me to leave. I pulled into the driveway on that Saturday afternoon. The house was beautiful. White siding, black shutters, a front porch with 2 new rocking chairs. There were cars everywhere, parked all the way down the block. I could hear music from inside before I even opened my truck door. Not holiday music, something with a heavy bass line I did not recognize. I straightened my jacket. I was wearing what I always wear: jeans, a flannel shirt, my brown work boots. I had driven 4 hours and I was 67 years old. I was not there to impress anyone. I was there to see my daughter and my granddaughter and eat pie with them before the holiday. I knocked on the door. A young woman I did not recognize opened it. She looked at me with a polite, puzzled expression, the way you look at a delivery man who has come to the wrong address. I told her I was Jennifer's father. She said, "Oh," and went to find her. I stood on the porch and looked at the rocking chairs. I had helped pick them out online. Jennifer had sent me photos on her phone and asked which ones she should get. I had said the ones with the wider armrests. Those will be more comfortable when you are sitting outside in the morning. She had bought them the next day. Jennifer appeared in the doorway. She was wearing a black dress and heels, and her hair was done in a way I had never seen before. She looked elegant. She looked like a stranger. "Dad." Her voice was low and tight. "What are you doing here?" It was not a question. It had the same flat tone as a statement of fact, like saying the weather is cold or the road is icy. I told her I wanted to surprise her. I held up the pie box. She did not smile. She looked over her shoulder, then back at me, and she stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door mostly closed behind her. The music spilled out for a moment and then was muffled again. She said, "We are having people over. Important people. Scott's partners from the firm and their wives." She paused and looked at me, at my boots, at my flannel shirt. She exhaled through her nose. "Dad, you cannot come in looking like that. These are not backyard barbecue people. These are the kind of people we need to impress right now." I stood there, holding a warm pie I had driven 4 hours to bring her. She said, "I am not trying to be hurtful. I'm just being honest. Scott is up for senior partner. Everything we do right now matters. The way the house looks, the people we have over, the impression we make." She gestured at me with one hand, a quick dismissive motion, like she was clearing something off a table. "You showing up like this, out of nowhere, dressed like you just came from a job site, it is going to undermine everything." I said her name once. Just that. She said, "Can you just go find a coffee shop for a couple hours? Come back at 7 when everyone is gone and we can have pie then. I will text you when they leave." Then Scott appeared in the doorway behind her. My son-in-law. He did not say hello. He said, "Jennifer, your father needs to move his truck. It is blocking the Hendersons' car and they're about to leave." He glanced at me with the particular expression of a man who is irritated that a problem he thought was managed has returned. "Hey, Tom." "Hey, Scott." He went back inside. The door opened briefly and I heard someone laugh, a high, bright sound, and then it closed again. My daughter looked at me. She was waiting for me to agree. She was waiting for me to apologize for existing and go find somewhere to sit by myself for 2 hours so I would not embarrass her in front of the people she needed to impress. I looked at the rocking chairs. "Okay," I said. I walked back to my truck. I set the pie box on the passenger seat next to my jacket. I pulled out of the driveway and I did not look in the rearview mirror. I turned onto the main road and I drove. I drove past the coffee shops and the diners and the gas stations on the edge of Ann Arbor, and I kept going north until the lights thinned out and the sky got dark and big, and the first snow of November started coming down in the headlights. I thought about Carol. I thought about what she used to say about our daughter. She used to say Jennifer has your drive and my stubbornness, which means she is going to run the world or run herself into a wall. She said it with love. She always said everything with love. I was not angry when I drove away from that house. I want to be clear about that. Anger is hot and quick. What I felt was something colder and much heavier. It was the weight of a man who has just understood something he had been not wanting to understand for a long time. I found a motel outside Saline, paid cash, lay on top of the covers and look at the ceiling. The pie was on the desk. I ate one piece at midnight standing up in the dark motel room because I was hungry and I had not eaten since morning. At some point, I picked up my phone. I went into my bank's app. I found the wire transfer confirmation from September. $65,000, outgoing, Jennifer M. and Scott D. joint account. Then I went into my own account settings. I had set up a monthly transfer in October, $2,000 a month to Jennifer's account. She had asked for it in September. She said the new mortgage was higher than expected, and they were stretched thin getting settled in. She said it would only be for 6 months, just until they got their feet under them. I had said yes. I had said of course. I had set up the recurring transfer without a second thought. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I went to recurring transfers and I found it. Jennifer Household Support, $2,000. First of every month. I pressed cancel. A box appeared asking if I was sure. I thought about her face on that porch. I thought about Scott saying, "Move your truck," without saying hello. I thought about my granddaughter Lily, who I had not even seen because I never got through the front door. I confirmed the cancellation. I put the phone face down on the nightstand and went to sleep. In the morning, I drove home to Grand Rapids. I did not text Jennifer to tell her she could have her pie. I did not stop by on the way out of town. I just drove north and watched the snow come down on the flat Michigan farmland, and I thought about things. I want to tell you what I do for a living, because it matters to what comes next. I am not a retired contractor living on a pension. I spent 20 years swinging a hammer, yes, but I also spent the last 15 years building a property management company that now owns 22 residential properties across western Michigan. I have a small office on Wealthy Street in Grand Rapids with 2 full-time employees. I am not a wealthy man by the standards of the people Jennifer was trying to impress that night. But I am not the man they imagined either. I drive an old truck because I like it. I wear flannel shirts because I have worn them my entire adult life, and I find them comfortable. I've never felt the need to explain myself to anyone. Until that weekend, I had never felt the need to explain myself to my own daughter. The call started Sunday night, the day after I left. I was sitting in my kitchen eating leftover soup when my phone lit up. Jennifer. I let it ring. It rang again 20 minutes later. I let it ring again. Monday morning, there were 3 voicemails. I listened to the first one while I was making coffee. Dad, hey, it's me. Listen, I think there was a misunderstanding yesterday. I did not mean for you to leave. I just needed 20 minutes to get the guests out the door, and then you could have come back in. I feel terrible that you drove all that way. Can you call me? I poured my coffee. I went to my office. The second voicemail was for Monday evening. Her voice had changed. There was an edge in it now, something careful and managed, the way she used to sound when she was a teenager and wanted something and knew she had to handle me correctly to get it. Dad, the mortgage payment did not come through this month. I think there might be an issue with the transfer. Can you look into it and call your bank? We have auto pay set up and it bounced back. Let me know. I sat with that for a moment. She had not called to apologize. She had called because the money stopped. The third voicemail was Tuesday. The management was gone. She sounded like herself, which meant she sounded frightened. Dad, pick up the phone. The transfer is canceled. I can see it in the app. It says canceled by account holder. Why would you do that? We have a mortgage payment due in 2 weeks. We have bills. You cannot just pull this out from under us without any warning. Call me back right now. I did not call her back. I want to tell you about my granddaughter Lily. She is 9 years old. She has Carol's eyes, this particular shade of gray-green that you do not see very often. She is quiet and sharp, and she loves puzzles, and she loves horses, and she loves to call me on Sunday afternoons and tell me about her week in great detail. Every subject in school, every lunch she ate, every book she is reading. She has called me every Sunday since she was 5 years old. It is our thing. She had not called me the Sunday after Thanksgiving. She had not called the Sunday after that either. I called her school on a Wednesday. I know the name of her school because I have been paying the tuition for 2 years. It is a private school in Ann Arbor, one of the good ones, $500 a month. And Jennifer had asked me to cover it because they wanted Lily to have the best start possible, and the public school in their district was overcrowded. I had said yes. I always said yes. The woman who answered at the school was polite. She asked for Lily's last name. I gave it to her. She put me on hold. She came back and said she was sorry, but she did not show a Lily enrolled at their school currently. She said the name had been removed from their records in August. 2 months before I wired Jennifer $65,000. I thanked the woman and hung up. I sat at my desk for a long time. I called a man named Warren Briggs, not a fancy name, not an impressive office. He works out of a 2-room suite in a strip mall on the east side of Grand Rapids, and he drives a 10-year-old Buick. He is also the best private investigator I have ever used, and I have used him twice before for tenant disputes. I told him what I needed. I told him to follow the money and tell me what he found. He called me back in 4 days. I need you to understand that I am not a man who cries easily. I cried 3 times in my adult life before the day Warren Briggs sat across from me in my office and opened his folder. I cried when my mother died. I cried when Carol was diagnosed. I cried when Carol died. That is 3 times in 40 years. Warren set a document on my desk. It was a bank statement. It showed deposits from my account, tuition payments I had been making for 2 years, and it showed where those payments went after they hit Jennifer's account, not to the school, to something called Apex Ridge Consulting, LLC, which Warren had traced to a separate account in Scott's name, which had been used to fund a series of transfers to online trading platforms and what appeared to be a sports gambling service operating out of a server in Curacao. Scott was not up for senior partner. Warren had confirmed this with a source at the firm. Scott had been placed on administrative leave in March for conduct issues that were still under internal review. The story about the Thanksgiving party, about impressing the right people, about Scott's career being at a critical moment. It was a performance. They were not building a life. They were running out of runway. I turned the page. The next document was a photograph. It showed Lily standing outside a school, not her private school. A public elementary school 4 blocks from the house, the one in the overcrowded district Jennifer had been so concerned about. The timestamp on the photo was from a Tuesday 2 weeks earlier. She was wearing a backpack that was too big for her, and her coat was unzipped even though it was 40 degrees out. She was walking alone. Warren said, "There is no record of any private school enrollment for your granddaughter in Ann Arbor in the past year. The tuition money has been going to Scott's LLC since September of last year." He cleared his throat. "There is more." He slid another page across the desk. It was a credit report, Scott's. The debt load was significant. Credit cards maxed, 2 personal loans, a line against a 401k. The mortgage payment they could not make was not actually going to be late because of the canceled transfer. It was going to be late because they had burned through everything else first, and my money was the last card in the hand. I said, "What about Lily? Is she okay?" Warren said, "She appears healthy. From what I could observe, she goes to school, she comes home, she does not appear to be in any immediate physical danger. But," he paused, "I talked to a neighbor across the street, an older woman who watches the block. She said the little girl spends a lot of time by herself in the afternoons. She said she has seen her sitting on the front steps after school for an hour sometimes before anyone lets her in." My granddaughter. Sitting on her front steps. In November. In Michigan. I looked at the window of my office. The parking lot outside was gray and wet. I thought about Lily calling me on Sundays and telling me about her week. I thought about how she had stopped calling. I thought about what kind of week you have when you spend an hour on the front steps in the cold, waiting to be let into your own house. I called my attorney. His name is Douglas Parrish, and he is the kind of lawyer who does not need to be dramatic because the facts do their own work. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When I was done, he said, "Tom, you understand that what I'm hearing may rise to the level of educational neglect and financial fraud against a minor's interests." He said it matter-of-factly, the way you describe a symptom to a doctor. I said I understood. I said I understood. I said I needed 2 things. The first was an emergency custody petition for Lily. The second was a demand letter for the return of every dollar that had been diverted from that school tuition account. Douglas said, "The custody petition is going to require a hearing. It will not happen overnight." I said I understood. I said, "But before any of that, I need to do something else first." I told him what I had in mind. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "That is going to be a scene." I said, "I know." Jennifer and Scott were throwing a Christmas party. Of course they were. They had told me about it when things were still normal. Back in October when Jennifer called to chat and tell me about their plans and how they were settling into the neighborhood. She had invited me. She had said, "Come down the Friday before Christmas. We are having friends over. It will be fun." I had said I would try to make it. She had not uninvited me since. As far as the paperwork was concerned, I was still on the guest list. I drove down to Ann Arbor on a Friday night in December. This time, I did not drive my truck. I borrowed a car from a colleague, a dark blue Lexus. Not because I needed to make a statement, but because I was tired of being judged by what I drove. I wore a suit. It was the suit I wore to Carol's funeral and to my business attorney's retirement dinner, and exactly one other time in the last decade. It fit. I had it pressed at the cleaners on Thursday. I arrived at 9 in the evening. The house was bright and full of people. I could see them through the front window, standing with glasses, talking. The particular loosened animation of people on their second or third drink. I did not go to the front door alone. Douglas Parrish stood to my left in a gray wool coat, his briefcase in his hand. To my right was a woman named Rachel Cole, a family law attorney who specialized in emergency custody proceedings and who Douglas had called in as a second for the evening. Behind us, parked at the curb, was a Kent County Sheriff's deputy named Davis, who had agreed to accompany us for the civil standby, which is what they call it when law enforcement accompanies a legal proceeding to keep the peace. I rang the doorbell. The young woman who answered this time was someone I did not know, a party guest, holding a glass of wine. She saw me and smiled and said, "Come on in," and I walked into my daughter's house for the first time since September. The living room was warm and crowded and loud with conversation. Someone had a Christmas playlist going, the kind with the old standards, Nat King Cole, Bing Crosby, the songs Carol used to put on when she was baking. The irony of that was not lost on me. I stood in the entryway and looked around until I found Jennifer. She was near the kitchen, laughing at something a man in a blazer was saying. She looked happy. She looked at ease. She had not had a hard month. She had had a month where all the bills were delayed and all the performances were maintained, and nothing had collapsed yet. She saw me. The laugh stopped. She crossed the room toward me quickly, and I could see the effort she was making to keep her expression neutral, to manage this in front of her guests. She got close and said through her teeth, "What are you doing here?" I said, "You invited me." She said, "That was before." I said, "Before what, Jennifer?" She looked past me and saw Douglas and Rachel and the deputy by the door. Her face changed. It went through several expressions very fast, and then it settled on something I had never seen on her face before. It was a particular kind of fear, not the fear of a dangerous situation, the fear of being seen. Scott appeared at her shoulder. He saw the deputy's uniform. He said, "What is this?" His voice was sharp and careful, the voice of a man who has been waiting for something like this and has been hoping it would not come yet. I said, "Scott, this is Douglas Parrish. He is my attorney. And this is Rachel Cole, who is a family law specialist. They have some paperwork for you both." Douglas opened his briefcase on the entryway table. He was not theatrical about it. He simply placed the documents where people could see them and explained clearly and without drama what each one was. The first was a demand letter for the return of $24,000 in school tuition payments that had been diverted from their intended purpose. The second was a formal accounting request for the $65,000 gift, which Douglas explained had been given under representations that were demonstrably false, and which Scott's LLC had in part received and redirected. The third was the custody petition. The room had gone very quiet. People were not pretending to have other conversations anymore. They were listening. The Nat King Cole song finished and another one started, and nobody moved to turn it up. Jennifer said, "You cannot do this." Douglas said, "Ma'am, these are legal documents. You do not have to engage with them here. You can contact your attorney Monday morning and respond through appropriate channels." Scott said, "There is going to be a problem here." He said it to the deputy. He said, "This man is harassing my family. He is mentally unwell. He has been making threats and acting erratically, and I want him removed from my property." The deputy said, "Whose name's on the deed, sir?" Scott stopped. I looked at him. I had not said anything yet that was not absolutely necessary. I had let Douglas do his work. But I spoke now. I said, "We can check the deed if you like. It will show the property held by a trust. The trust my wife and I set up in 2004. The trust that I am the sole trustee of. Which means technically, Scott, this is not your property. You were living here on the understanding that I was covering the down payment as a gift. A gift made based on representations about your career and your finances that were not accurate. I had done my own research in the week before the party. Douglas had helped. The house had been purchased using my $65,000 plus a mortgage. The mortgage was in both Jennifer and Scott's names. I was not on the title, but the down payment had come from a trust account, and Douglas had found a provision in the original trust language from 2004 that gave me recourse if funds were dispersed under false pretenses. It was not as clean as owning the building outright. It was messier than that, more legally complicated, but it was enough. It was enough for Douglas to send that demand letter. It was enough for the deputy to be standing in the entryway with us. It was enough for the guests at the party to understand that something was very wrong with the story Scott and Jennifer had been telling about their life. Someone near the back of the room said they should probably get going. Then someone else. The party began to come apart the way a gathering does when the mood breaks, quietly and quickly and all at once. Coats retrieved, goodbyes shortened. Within 15 minutes, the living room held only the four of us and the deputy in the particular mess of a party that has ended too soon. Half-full glasses and uneaten food and the Christmas music still playing to an empty room. Scott stood in the center of it all. He looked at me, and he looked at Douglas's briefcase, and he looked at his wife. Then he sat down on the couch and put his face in his hands. Jennifer did not sit down. She stood with her arms crossed and her chin up, and she said, "You do not understand what it has been like." Her voice was shaking. "You have no idea what the pressure has been." Scott lost his position and we had bills, and I could not tell you because I knew you would judge us. I knew you would say we should have planned better. I knew you would pull the money." She paused. "The tuition," she said, and something in her voice changed. "The tuition was only supposed to be temporary. We were going to put it back." I said, "Lily has been sitting on the front steps after school waiting to be let in." She stopped. I said, "In November. In Michigan." She looked at the floor. I said, "I am not here to punish you, Jennifer. I want you to understand that. I am here because I need to know that my granddaughter is safe and cared for. Everything else, the money, the legal question about the down payment, all of that can be worked out. But Lily comes first. She has always come first. She was supposed to come first for you too." Jennifer sat down then. She sat down in the armchair near the fireplace, and she looked at Scott with an expression I could not entirely read, something between anger and exhaustion and what might have been relief. She said, "Scott, tell him." Her voice was flat. Scott raised his head from his hands. He looked at me. He looked at me. He looked tired in the way that people look when they have been maintaining an unsustainable thing for a very long time and it has finally given out. He said, "I made bad choices." He said, "I am not proud of it." He said, Jennifer did not know the full extent of it until recently. The trading account, the losses, she found out about it in October. I looked at my daughter. She had found out in October. The same month she asked me for the monthly transfer. She said, I did not know what to do. I was scared. She did not look at me. I said, "You could have told me." She said, "I know." That was all she said, just "I know." And I believed her. That is the honest thing. I sat there in that quiet room with the Christmas music still playing, and I believed that she knew, had known for a long time, that she could have told me, and she had not. Because she was my daughter, and she was proud, and she had built a life she wanted me to see as successful, and she could not make herself take it apart in front of me. That is not an excuse. It is an explanation. There is a difference, and I am 67 years old, and I have had enough time on this earth to know the difference. I told Rachel Cole to explain the custody petition. Rachel spoke to them both quietly and clearly. She said that based on what she had reviewed, the petition had a reasonable chance of being granted for temporary placement of Lily with me, while a guardian ad litem assessment was completed. She said this did not have to be adversarial. She said if Jennifer and I could agree on a voluntary arrangement while they stabilized their situation, it would be better for everyone and, most importantly, better for Lily. Jennifer looked at me for a long time. Then she said, "How long?" I said, "As long as it takes." She nodded once. It was a small motion. It cost her something. The deputy took Scott's statement about the diverted funds before he left. It was not an arrest. It was the beginning of a process. There would be attorneys involved for months after that night, negotiations about the demand letter, a repayment arrangement, a separate conversation with the school district about getting Lily properly enrolled. Scott's firm had already been conducting their own review. I did not need to accelerate that. It accelerated itself. I drove Lily home with me that night. She had been upstairs the whole time the party was happening, which Jennifer told me later was where she usually ended up at their gatherings. She came downstairs when Jennifer called for her, and she walked into the living room and saw me in my suit and stopped. Then she ran across the room and wrapped both arms around me and pressed her face into my jacket. I held on to her for a long time. In the car driving north on US 23 in the dark, she fell asleep with her head against the window about 45 minutes outside of Ann Arbor. I turned the heat up and drove carefully because the road was wet. The Christmas music on the radio was softer now, something instrumental, and the snow was starting again, the first real snow that would stick. I want to tell you how things are now, because I think you deserve to know the end of it. Lily has been with me in Grand Rapids since December. She started at a good school here in January. Her teacher sent me an email last week that said Lily is an exceptionally curious student who contributes thoughtful observations to class discussions. I printed that email and taped it to the refrigerator. She calls her mother twice a week. The calls are good ones. Jennifer is in therapy, which she told me about herself, unprompted, on a Sunday morning phone call in February. She said it was the first time in years she felt like she was telling me the truth. I told her that was a start. Scott and Jennifer are working through things. I do not know what the outcome of their marriage will be. That is not my decision, and it is not my business. What I know is that the repayment arrangement is being honored and the legal process is moving the way legal processes move, which is slowly and in documents. Jennifer came up to visit Lily in March. She stayed for a weekend. On Saturday morning, the three of us drove out to a farm east of the city where they had horses, and Lily rode a chestnut mare named Birch for 45 minutes, while Jennifer and I stood at the fence and watched. We did not talk about the money or the house or any of it. We talked about Lily. We talked about Carol a little. Jennifer told me she was sorry, not in the careful, managed way she had been in the living room in December. She said it plain, like she meant it. I told her that her mother would have wanted her to find her way back to herself. I told her that was what I wanted too. I meant it. I also mean it when I say it will take time. Trust is not a switch. It is something you build, the same way you build a house, one honest day at a time. On Easter Sunday, I gave Lily a wooden puzzle box I had made in my garage workshop during the winter. It had a hidden compartment inside that you could only open if you knew the trick. A small push on a panel that looked like part of the decoration. Inside the compartment, I put a note that said, "The best things are worth figuring out," and a photograph of her grandmother Carol from 1989, standing in the backyard of the house where Jennifer grew up, laughing at something off camera. Lily figured out the trick in about 4 minutes. She held the photograph carefully with both hands and studied it for a long time. She looked up at me and said, "She looks like she was fun." I said, "She was the funniest person I ever knew." She put the photograph back in the hidden compartment and closed it. She said, "I am going to keep it safe in there." That is the whole story. I drove 4 hours to see my daughter and was told to move my truck and come back when I was less embarrassing. I drove home instead. I made some phone calls. I had some hard conversations, and somewhere on the other side of all of it, I found my granddaughter sitting on a front step where she should not have been, and I brought her inside where it was warm. If you have ever had to choose between the comfortable lie and the painful truth, you know that the truth is always heavier in the short term. But it is the only thing that holds weight over time. Subscribe if that means something to you, and I will keep telling these stories for as long as I have them.